They called it the biggest fentanyl bust in DEA history. 400 kilos of pills, millions in cash, and a cartel network dismantled across 5 states. Just weeks earlier, another massive operation on the dark web had netted hundreds of arrests spanning 4 continents. The Justice Department says these victories prove their priorities work. But here's the twist. While celebrating these headline-grabbing wins, they're also slashing funding for programs designed to stop hate crimes before they even happen. Programs backed by survivors and family members connected to Emmett Till, James Byrd Jr., and Matthew Shepard are now on the chopping block. In one explosive hearing, lawmakers clashed over whether America's safety comes from brute force enforcement or from investing in the communities most at risk.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you, and welcome, Attorney General Bondi. I just wonder, sincerely wonder, do you hear how hollow your last words sound in light of the pardon of all of the January 6th people, day one of this administration? I believe you're sincere. You want to protect law enforcement, but your principal, the president, pardoned every single one on January 6th. It rings hollow when you say these words, that if you spit on a police officer, we're going to go after you. Talk to my friends who are Capitol Police officers who were here, 5 of whom are no longer here. They are dead. And this administration, and I guess I want to ask you, did you have any advice for the president when he came forward with the blanket pardon on January 20th? What advice did you offer the president?
I am never going to talk about conversations, advice
Were you asked
in any
for,
way.
Were you asked
I'm
for
never
advice?
going to talk about discussions I've had
Because
or have not had.
You'll
But I
remember.
can answer with the President of the United
Yes or no?
States.
Did you give him any advice? Yes or no?
I am not going to discuss any conversations
That's a
that
no.
I have had with it.
And
You just put
your
words in
own
my
word,
mouth. I
but-
am not going to
No,
discuss.
I'm going to reveal your own words.
I am
Just a
not
moment.
going to
Please stop.
discuss
Please stop. This is
conversations
my
that I've
time.
had with the President of the United States.
Attorney
You asked
General,
me a question.
I would like to reclaim
and
the
you
last
asked
20
me to
seconds.
answer.
I have asked to reclaim my time. Please put 20 seconds back on the clock.
You have an extra 30.
If the general,
She answered and then answered it again and answered it again with a non-answer. I ask for your consideration
if the
of
general
putting time
lady
on.
will let the witness answer the question, we will.
She
proceed.
answered it by saying no. Okay. The 3 hallmarks of this administration are incompetence, corruption, and cruelty. I'm going to focus today on corruption. And in my mind, there are 2 types of corruption: personal, and then the other I'm going to call public, governmental. Attorney General, have you ever been registered as an agent of a foreign principal under the Foreign Agents Registration Act?
I assume you're talking about when I represented the country of Qatar for a very short time.
The answer is yes. No,
hold
excuse
on.
me.
No.
No.
For anti-human trafficking
Just-
for the World Cup.
Att-
Anti-human trafficking
or
for the
no?
World Cup.
Attorney
you can't
General-
put words in my mouth.
No.
You want to talk about incompetence? You're the one that
Excuse-
said Joe Biden on PBS was competent. You had to retract those words. So
Mr.
don't
Chairman,
talk to me. Don't insult me publicly.
this is so discourteous. This is so outside the committee's guidelines. Taking a personal shot at me while swiping at Biden, very strange and very unprofessional of you. The answer is yes or no, and the answer is yes. You were registered as a lobbyist for Qatar. Is that correct? Yes. Never mind. Don't answer. Did you disclose that when you went before for the Senate for confirmation? Yes or no? No, it was not in your documents. The answer is no. President Trump.
This was discussed at my confirmation hearings in detail.
It was it was discussed, but you failed to bring up the conflict that you had. President Trump recently announced he'd accept that $400 million Qatar airplane because it was just prettier than the one he was flying around in. Is it true that you gave advice that this was legally permissible? Yes or no?
I will not discuss any advice that my Office of Legal Counsel gives to the President of the United States on any matter.
When you spoke before the Senate, you said you would ask for ethical advice. Did you recuse yourself from that issue?
And talking about unprofessional, you say the president wanted a jet because it's pretty?
Excuse
Come
me.
on, this is a Senate, this is
He
a
said it
congressional
himself.
hearing.
He said it himself.
What unfolded wasn't just about numbers, it was a fight over the very definition of justice. It began with a direct, almost urgent question from Congressman Harold Rogers. His district, like so many rural parts of America, has been gutted by overdose deaths and the relentless spread of illicit drugs. He wanted to know, with the fiscal year 2026 budget in place, what exactly was the Department of Justice doing differently this time? How was it going to address the constant flow of narcotics and the sophisticated networks trafficking them? The Attorney General didn't hesitate. Since her days as a state Attorney General, she said, she had been focused on the opioid crisis, and now, with the full force of every federal law enforcement agency at her disposal, the mission was clear: get the drugs off the streets and keep them off. Her first example was May 22's Operation Raptor, a joint FBI and DOJ sting targeting fentanyl trafficking on the dark web. In a coordinated effort with 9 international partners, they seized 144 kilograms of fentanyl, 180 firearms, and over $200 million in cash and digital assets. The sweep resulted in 270 arrests across 4 continents. She framed the operation as proof of what could be achieved when agencies work together, cutting through bureaucratic silos to face a crisis head-on. The message was unmistakable: this was not just policing, this was global-scale enforcement. Then came the May 6 operation, one she called the biggest fentanyl bust in DEA history. The target, a branch of the notorious Sinaloa cartel operating across New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Oregon, and Nevada. Agents seized 412 kilos of fentanyl pills, another 11.5 kilos of fentanyl powder, and 49 illegal firearms. 16 alleged traffickers were arrested. The cartel's leader, living quietly in Oregon, was so insulated from the drugs themselves that none were found near him. Still, meticulous investigative work brought him down. She painted a vivid picture of conference rooms filled with charts, evidence boards, and agents from multiple federal agencies working in unison. It was, she said, some of the most complex law enforcement work in the country, and she was proud to stand behind it. Rogers congratulated her, but then pivoted to a growing concern: the northern border. He cited testimony from FBI Director Patel about precursor chemicals originating in China, rerouted through terrorist organizations, and brought into the U.S. via Canada. Bondi didn't flinch. She confirmed the intelligence and expanded on it. At a recent international security conference in Poland, she had been told by her Polish counterpart that fentanyl wasn't yet in their country, and the reason was simple: they protected their borders. The northern border, she admitted, was now a significant concern for the U.S., just as much as the southern one. She detailed how these precursors were constantly being altered to evade detection, shipped through Mexico, Canada, and directly into U.S. ports. She'd even visited a DEA lab, where she held up a vial containing what looked like a pinch of salt, sodium chloride, standing in for fentanyl. Just 2 grains worth, she said, could kill a person. The problem wasn't just the smugglers. It was that young people often didn't even know they were taking fentanyl. They thought they were buying Xanax, Adderall, or oxycodone. But these pills were laced with poison. It was a sobering warning, the kind that made it clear she saw this crisis as a bipartisan issue that everyone should unite to fight. But then the entire tone of the hearing shifted. Congresswoman Grace Meng took the floor and steered the conversation toward an entirely different kind of threat: hate crimes. She expressed deep concern over the DOJ's proposal to end several key grant programs that had been helping prevent such crimes. One of these, the Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice program, had been created in fiscal year 2022, a direct response to the surge in anti-Asian violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. Meng reminded the room of the 2021 Atlanta spa shootings that claimed the lives of 6 women of Asian descent, and of the Bipartisan Hate Crimes Act passed that year. She read into the record a letter signed by survivors and family members connected to landmark cases of racial violence: Emmett Till, James Byrd Jr., and Matthew Shepard, urging the Attorney General not to terminate these grants. In addition to the Community-Based Approaches program, the cuts targeted the Jabara Hire No Hate Act, and the Shepherd Bird Initiative. Meng's point was clear: these programs weren't just about prosecution after the fact, they were about prevention, education, and building trust between law enforcement and vulnerable communities. Bondi's response was cautious. She admitted she wasn't familiar with the specifics of those 3 programs, but promised to work with Meng on the issue. She explained that her office oversaw 5,800 grants, and that 365, about 6%, had been cut. Of those, 13 had already been reinstated after people reached out. She even offered her personal cell phone to lawmakers, saying she would gladly discuss any specific grant they felt should be restored. Still, her language made it clear that law enforcement and prosecution remained her highest priorities. Prevention programs were important, she implied, but in a tight fiscal environment, they were considered on a case-by-case basis. The exchange between Rogers, Bondi, and Meng became more than just a budget debate. It revealed 2 sharply different visions of public safety. One prioritized dismantling criminal networks, securing borders, and flooding resources into enforcement. The other insisted that prevention, community resilience, and protecting vulnerable groups were just as critical to keeping Americans safe. Bondi's recitation of massive busts and complex operations reinforced the Republican law and order framework, a narrative designed to show strength and decisive action. Meng's arguments underscored the Democratic belief that without trust, inclusion, and proactive support, enforcement alone could never be enough. This philosophical divide has been a recurring theme in American politics. Republicans lean into interdiction, fortified borders, and high-profile operations that produce immediate tangible results. Democrats push for parallel investments in education, outreach, and the kinds of grants that may not generate headlines but quietly reduce violence over time. Bondi's position, while celebrating her department's successes, risked appearing dismissive toward the softer, less visible work of prevention. Meng's framing suggested that cutting these programs was not just a budgetary choice, but a moral one, and one that could have dire consequences. The stakes go beyond abstract policy. If hate crime prevention programs remain defunded and incidents rise, Democrats will portray the GOP as having abandoned bipartisan commitments and ignored the needs of at-risk communities. Republicans, meanwhile, will highlight victories like Operation Raptor and the Sinaloa takedown, presenting themselves as the only ones capable of protecting American families from lethal threats. Public opinion complicates the picture. Polling shows most Americans actually want both: a strong, aggressive fight against traffickers, and a commitment to social investments that prevent violence in the first place. The political danger for Republicans is that overemphasizing enforcement can make them look indifferent to marginalized communities. For Democrats, the risk lies in appearing too focused on prevention, while downplaying the urgent need for immediate action against lethal threats like fentanyl. As the appropriations process moves forward, these fault lines will only deepen. Democrats will fight to restore the grants, framing the cuts as short-sighted and dangerous. Republicans will double down on their enforcement-first budget, pointing to international operations, record seizures, and cartel leaders in handcuffs as proof of success. The 2026 elections could easily turn this into a defining issue, with safety through strength and safety through solidarity competing for the public's trust. What makes this moment so pivotal is that it's not just about how to spend money, it's about what kind of country the United States wants to be. Can it protect its citizens from both drug cartels and hate-driven violence? Can it uphold justice that is both strong and fair? Or will the nation continue to treat these priorities as if they are in conflict, forcing a false choice between them? The hearing offered no easy answers, but it laid bare the values and strategies each side is prepared to fight for. Because in the end, a nation capable of seizing 400 kilos of fentanyl is also capable of funding programs that protect its most marginalized citizens. The question is whether it will choose to do both. If you believe these are conversations more Americans need to hear, and if you want to see what happens when power, policy, and politics collide in real time, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video so we can keep bringing you the stories that shape our future.